Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide. A reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that because of the Louisiana Purchase, over 827,000 square miles of land was added to the United States? Learn how this enabled President Thomas Jefferson to send Meriwether Lewis and William Clark on a mission called the Corps of Discovery, and how Lewis and Clark discovered 120 animal and 200 plant specimens never before recorded by Americans. Learn how the Corps of Discovery built peaceful relationships with many Native American tribes along the way.
Imagine wiring like $15 million for a piece of real estate you haven't even seen a satellite image of.
Yeah, just totally sight unseen.
Right. You don't know the topography, you don't know the resources, you don't even know where the property lines end.
It's crazy.
But, in 1803, President Thomas Jefferson did exactly that. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We're looking at an incredible stack of sources today, mostly historical logs and personal journals.
That's primary stuff, yeah?
Exactly. And we're using them to look at the legendary Corps of Discovery, which most people just know as the Lewis and Clark expedition.
Right, the ultimate road trip.
The ultimate, incredibly dangerous road trip. Our mission today is to really figure out how they survived what many assume was just like an 8,000-mile suicide mission, and why it was actually a massive triumph, and also uncover this weirdly profound lesson that their daily survival habits hold for your life today.
I mean, it really is a transaction that defies modern logic. You're talking about 827,000 square miles of completely uncharted territory.
Just massive.
It is. Jefferson had basically just doubled the size of the United States overnight with the Louisiana Purchase, but he was essentially holding a blank map. He really needed that black box illuminated.
Right, because, well, our audience knows this was the Louisiana Purchase.
Yeah.
And they know the ultimate prize everyone wanted was the Northwest Passage.
Yeah, the direct water route.
Exactly. But I want to pause on the geopolitical weight of that for a second.
Yeah.
Because finding a direct water route across the continent
Yeah.
wasn't just about, making travel a little easier. It was about global dominance, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. A direct water route meant a total monopoly on the Asian spice trade.
Wow.
I mean, it meant controlling the economic arteries of North America. So Jefferson wasn't just like sending some guys out to look at trees and draw a few maps.
Right.
He needed strategic, actionable intelligence. He needed to know exactly where the Mississippi and Missouri rivers connected. He needed the geography mapped, the resources cataloged, the potential of the land understood.
You needed hard data.
Exactly. He needed data, and he needed it from an environment that actively wanted to kill the people collecting it.
Which, that brings us to the preparation. Because this is where the popular myth kind of falls apart for me. We tend to picture these guys just like throwing some beef jerky in a canoe and paddling west.
Oh, yeah, a little weekend camping trip.
Right. But reading through the source material, outfitting this expedition sounds less like a camping trip and more like, engineering a spacecraft for a Martian landing.
That's a really good analogy, actually.
Because every single ounce had to have a purpose. So how do you even begin to pack for an environment when you literally don't know what the environment is?
Well, you start by accepting that enthusiasm and bravery are just entirely insufficient.
You need more than just guts.
Way more. You need intense, highly specialized cross-training. Meriwether Lewis understood that he wasn't just going to be a military commander out there. He had to become like a mobile data processor.
Wow, yeah.
And a survival specialist. So he didn't just pack his bags. He went into this intensive academic exile. He actually studied medicine, which in the early 1800s was pretty brutal.
Yeah, lots of bloodletting and questionable potions, I'm sure.
Oh, totally. But it was absolutely necessary when you are your own hospital. He also studied botany because when your rations run out, you need to know exactly which route will sustain you and which route will stop your heart.
So he's basically downloading the entirety of Western scientific knowledge into his brain before they even leave.
Basically.
And meanwhile, you have William Clark acting as the head of human resources over at Camp Du Bois, which was just north of St. Louis. But wait, if you look at trapping crews of that era, they're usually just, tough guys out in the woods. How is Clark's recruiting strategy actually different from anyone else hiring for a dangerous wilderness job?
It really came down to the psychological profile. Clark was just ruthless in his hiring criteria. The sources show he specifically sought out healthy, unmarried men who possessed really exceptional survival and hunting skills.
Unmarried. That's the detail that really sticks out to me. Why was that so crucial?
Well, think about the psychological toll of a mission with an open-ended return date.
Or no return date at all.
Right, a high probability of no return at all. If a man has a family back home, his instincts are divided. And in a moment of extreme crisis, a divided mind hesitates.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that makes sense.
Clark needed a final corps of volunteers, which it ended up being 45 men, including 27 soldier volunteers and a contracted boat crew. But he needed men who had zero ties pulling them back east.
He needed their absolute, undivided focus on survival.
Exactly. Focus on the group and the completion of the mission.
That makes complete sense. You need people who are totally all in. But, looking at the roster, what strikes me is that the success of this heavily militarized, highly trained group ultimately relied on people who completely broke that mold.
No, definitely.
The diversity of the final team is just staggering.
It is, and it wasn't just for show. It was a strategic necessity. They brought on a French-Canadian trapper and, crucially, his Shoshone Indian wife, Sacagawea.
Right.
They also had a slave named York who was owned by Clark.
I really want to dig into Sacagawea's role here because she is such a massive historical figure, but the mechanics of how she helped often get sort of smoothed over. I mean, she wasn't just pointing a finger saying, go that way.
Not at all. I mean, yes, Sacagawea and her husband served as vital guides and interpreters, but her sheer presence functioned as this incredibly effective diplomatic shield.
A diplomatic shield? How so?
Well, you have to understand the visual language of the frontier at that time. A large group of heavily armed men traveling through uncharted territory is universally interpreted as a war party.
Oh, of course.
But war parties do not travel with a woman, and they certainly don't travel with a woman carrying a baby.
Oh, wow. So just by existing in the group, she is broadcasting the signal of peace to every tribe watching them from the bluff.
Exactly. Her presence instantly de-escalated potentially lethal encounters well before a single word was even translated.
That is brilliant. And speaking of survival mechanics, we have to talk about the gear. Because again, it wasn't just rifles and blankets. The packing list in the sources is wildly specific.
Oh, it's meticulous.
They're carrying compasses, telescopes, and sextants for surveying. And then for survival, they've got oilcloth, tools, utensils, mosquito netting, plus all the weapons, ammunition, and fishing equipment.
And when you look at that list, you really see the dual nature of the mission. I mean, the mosquito netting isn't some luxury item. Malaria, mosquito-borne illnesses would decimate a crew faster than any predator.
Right, right.
The weapons and fishing gear, that's your grocery store. But the sextants and telescopes, that tells you this is a highly equipped scientific and diplomatic mobile laboratory.
But having a brilliant packing list and a diverse crew really only gets you so far. The collision between that meticulous preparation at Camp Du Bois and the actual reality of the trail is where the true test happens.
For sure.
So they officially hit the water on May 14th, 1804, heading upstream on the Missouri River. Fast forward exactly 1 year, May 1805. They're moving through present-day Montana, traveling along the Milk River.
Yep.
And I found this exact journal entry from Meriwether Lewis on May 7th. He writes, "The country we pass today on the north side of the river is one of the most beautiful plains we have yet seen. It rises gradually from the river bottom to the height of 50 or 60 feet, then becoming level as a bowling green, extends back as far as the eye can reach."
Level as a bowling green.
Yeah.
It's just a remarkably domestic, almost peaceful visual to apply to a completely wild frontier.
Right. But that's exactly what I don't get. They are describing it like a manicured English lawn, but the reality is they are starving, they're exhausted, and they are hauling these massive boats up a freezing river against the current.
Oh, yeah, the physical reality was a nightmare.
So how do they reconcile that cognitive dissonance? How are they appreciating the beauty while their bodies are literally breaking down?
I think it speaks to the immense discipline of the men, but particularly of William Clark. Because while they're battling bad weather, incredibly difficult terrain, severe injuries, and just the constant threat of hunger and disease, Clark has a specific responsibility.
Right, the mapping.
Exactly. He is the primary cartographer.
So he can't just survive. He has to document the survival. It's like trying to draw a highly accurate blueprint of a roller coaster while you're currently strapped into the front seat.
That is a perfect way to put it. I mean, over 2 years, they covered nearly 8,000 miles of land and water. And Clark had to ensure that every single step of that grueling physical suffering was translated into usable data.
It's unbelievable.
Picture it, you're freezing, your muscles are screaming, you've just negotiated a tense encounter with an unfamiliar Native American tribe, and your job for the evening is to pull out a delicate sextant, measure celestial bodies, do complex mathematical calculations by firelight, and meticulously chart your exact geographic coordinate.
The level of executive function required to do that while malnourished is just insane.
It really is.
But here is where I kind of have to push back on the grand narrative of this expedition. I mean, they push through the 8,000 miles, they make it to the Pacific Ocean, which is an incredible feat of human endurance.
Absolutely.
They turn around, survive the trip back, and return to Washington, D.C. in the fall of 1806 to give their final report to President Jefferson.
The ultimate performance review.
Exactly. But let's look at this objectively. Jefferson spent $15 million on the land, heavily funded this elite startup team specifically to find the Northwest Passage, the direct water route.
Right.
And they didn't find it because it didn't exist in the way Jefferson hoped.
Right. It just wasn't there.
So by modern venture capital standards, didn't Jefferson just burn millions of dollars and immense political capital to build the wrong product? How was this not viewed as a colossal failure?
Well, if you judge it strictly by the initial binary metric, did you find the magic river, yes or no, then sure, it's a failure. But this is a masterclass in the true meaning of return on investment.
Okay, how so?
Because the data they brought back completely dwarfed the original objective. The expedition was a world-changing success because the data was the product.
Okay, walk me through that. What was the actual ROI that made Jefferson forgive the lack of a Northwest Passage?
First, they fundamentally solved the geographic puzzle of the American interior. They discovered that the Missouri River joins the Mississippi River at St. Louis, which forms a massive continuous system of 2,341 miles of river.
Wow, 2,341 miles.
Yeah, that completely restructures how the nation views its own infrastructure and trade potential.
So they didn't find the highway to Asia, but they mapped the highway system for the entire North American continent.
Exactly. And secondly, those uncharted areas were no longer a black box. They didn't just walk through the territory, they documented it exhaustively. Our sources note they identified 120 entirely new animal specimens and logged 200 botanical specimens.
That is a biological explosion.
It is. And on the geopolitical front, the Corps established peaceful relations with dozens of Native American tribes. They effectively opened diplomatic channels across half a continent.
Which had to be absolutely critical for the future stability and expansion of the United States.
Critical. And, the most staggering statistic of the entire 8,000-mile journey, especially considering the encounters, the wildlife, the rapids, and the medical realities of 1804, they sustained only one single death in their entire group.
Only one death out of 45 men over 2 years. That's just wild.
Right. Given the medical standards of the time, where bloodletting was basically the go-to treatment for a fever, to take 45 people into the total unknown for that long and bring almost everyone back alive is miraculous.
It really is.
It validates every obsessive hour Meriwether Lewis spent studying medicine and every strict hiring parameter William Clark instituted back at Camp Du Bois.
Jefferson clearly saw the value of the pivot, too. The rewards for the team were massive. The sources say Jefferson gave Lewis and Clark double pay and 1,600 acres of land each.
Not a bad bonus.
Not at all. And Lewis's career skyrocketed. He was made governor of the Louisiana Territory, literally put in charge of the massive expanse he just mapped.
And Clark was appointed brigadier general of the militia for the territory. But, there's a deeply personal epilogue for Clark mentioned in the sources that I think really speaks to the reality of what they survived together.
What's that?
Well, after Sacagawe's death, Clark actually became the guardian of her children.
Oh, wow. That completely reframes the expedition for me. It wasn't just a military deployment. It was a crucible that bonded these people as a family for the rest of their lives.
Truly.
But looking at all of this, the 120 new animals, the 2,000-plus miles of river, the meticulous math done by firelight, there is a glaring mechanical question here.
Okay, what's that?
They dragged this data through freezing rivers, down treacherous rapids, and across deserts. How did any of this information physically survive to reach Jefferson's desk?
You're touching on the unsung hero of the expedition, the oilcloth.
The oilcloth.
Yes. The physical protection of their journals was treated with the exact same life-or-death urgency as their food supply. They understood that if the physical journals decayed or sank or were destroyed, the entire mission was effectively erased.
That is heavy.
They were, in a very real sense, data transmitters. The physical survival of the ink on the paper was the entire point.
And that changes everything about how we view this story. Because the only reason we know what the Bowling Green plains of Montana looked like before they were developed, or how deeply they suffered, or how Sacagawea changed the course of history, is because they painstakingly wrote it down and protected those pages with their lives.
Yeah, the history of the human race is entirely dependent on the people who actually bothered to document it.
Right.
The sources we're using today explicitly point out that these journals are still genuinely exciting to read over 2 centuries later. But more importantly, the source material uses this exact realization to pivot the lens directly onto you, the listener.
Right, because, well, it's easy to look at Meriwether Lewis documenting a grizzly bear and think, sure, he should keep a journal. He's out there making history.
Right, he's an explorer.
But I just went to the grocery store, answered emails, and sat in traffic. I'm not discovering a new river.
Exactly.
We tend to severely underestimate the value of our own ordinary experiences.
We view our lives as mundane because we are the ones living them. But the sources emphasize that our lives are incredibly important. By taking the time to write in a journal, we are essentially creating our own core of discovery records for the future.
Oh, I like that.
You are building the technology of legacy.
The technology of legacy. I love that phrasing. It fundamentally shifts the perspective from, am I doing something historically important to, am I documenting my reality?
There's a brilliant quote in our sources from President Spencer W. Kimball that frames this beautifully.
Oh, let's hear it.
He said, "On a number of occasions, I have encouraged the saints to keep personal journals and records. I renew that admonition." He goes on to say, "We may think there is little of interest or importance in what we personally say or do, but it is remarkable how many of our families, as we pass on down the line, are interested in all that we do and all that we say."
As we pass on down the line. Because to your great-great-grandchildren, the mundane details of your everyday life in the 2020s, how you communicate, what you worry about, how you make a living, it's all going to be an absolutely fascinating time capsule.
You are their frontier.
You are their frontier.
Yeah.
We have a direct question for you. Do you write in a journal? Because if you don't, today's the day to start recording your special and your everyday experiences.
Just write it down.
Right. As the sources remind us, these daily entries will bless the lives of your family for generations to come.
You don't need to be outfitting a wilderness startup or encountering new botanical species to have something immensely valuable to say about the human experience. The act of writing it down is what makes it valuable.
Exactly. So as we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. Think back to that brutal 8,000-mile journey.
Oh, that's suffering.
Right. If Lewis and Clark hadn't put pen to paper, their entire struggle, all that breathtaking scenery, the freezing nights, the complex diplomacy, it would have just vanished into the wind.
Entirely gone.
Now, look at your own life today. What completely ordinary routine or what passing observation you make this afternoon might actually serve as a fascinating historical treasure map for your own grandchildren a century from now. Start writing it down.
Thank you for joining us for this day in His story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in His story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.